MTR Tsuen Wan line services disrupted after a train incident at Yau Ma Tei station. A government pandemic advisor suggests there may be room for lifting COVID control rules next summer. And Democrats keep control of the U.S. Senate after midterm election victory in Nevada. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Hundreds of passengers on board a train in Yau Ma Tei station were evacuated after at least 2 sets of train doors fell off this morning. 2 people felt unwell after the incident, and the MTR said service disruption on the Tsuen Wan line will continue until at least tonight. MTR services between Jordan and Liking stations remain suspended for now. Initial investigation shows a derailed train bogie was to blame, which also indicate repair work will take some time. Following the incident, the train and the ripped-off doors stayed in the station with the platform doors shut. Police and firefighters arrived at the scene shortly, and MTR staff also inspected the rails. Officers received a report at around 9:30 a.m. today after smoke emerged from the train in question. A 78-year-old woman on the train suffered arm and leg injuries and was taken to the hospital. The rail operator said the driver stopped the train after 2 compartments entered the platform because he heard loud noise. It added a bogie of the first compartment of the train derailed, and repair work will very likely take a longer time to complete.
600 passengers evacuated safely and orderly through the platform here in Yau Ma Tei, and another 150 passengers are evacuated from the emergency ramp at the end of the train in accordance with the procedure, and they walked safely to Mong Kok Station. I would like to apologize again for all the effect and impact to our passengers.
But the apology didn't seem to calm some of the affected passengers, with many calling for better maintenance and demanding a clear explanation. This woman said she's so scared that a transportation as safe as an MTR train would become dangerous all of a sudden. This man said it's fortunate that this didn't happen during a work day or a school day. Still, an expert said there could be reasons other than a malfunctioned bogie that caused the derailment.
If the rail is broken, or if there's a crack in the rail head, or there may be a foreign object fell onto the track itself, then it may cause the wheel to hit this foreign object and cause the train to jump out of the rail. It's quite difficult for MTR to fix or to repair, or to let alone remove the train that's blocking the track.
After the incident, many passengers opted for bus services instead. The MTR also offered free shuttle buses travelling between Jordan and Liking stations. This just came about a year after a pair of doors, also ripped off, fell onto the tracks near an advertising board in Causeway Bay Station. The MTRC said it's still not sure if maintenance will be completed by tomorrow, while authorities promised to increase frequencies of other public transportation. Others called on passengers to allow extra travelling time on Monday. Residents in Liking were particularly concerned as they mainly rely on the MTR for travel. Commissioner for Transport Rosanna Law is confident the Transport Department has the ability to ramp up frequencies for public buses during peak hours. Officials stress they will keep close watch on any traffic congestion on roads tomorrow. Financial Secretary Paul Chan today said the government expected to see a fiscal deficit of more than $100 billion this year. But he stressed that authorities had sufficient reserves to cope with the city's weakening economy. The government earlier downgraded its GDP growth forecast for the year, estimating the local economy to shrink by 3.2%. The finance chief noted that the local economy would be affected by factors such as poor global market conditions and rising interest rates. However, he said there was no need to be too pessimistic. Chan added that more relief measures may be rolled out next year, depending on the city's economic situation. Secretary for Health Lo Chung-mau today said the government will have discussions with mainland authorities on increasing quarantine quotas so as to allow more Hong Kong people to cross the border. This comes after the mainland announced on Friday that inbound travelers will be subject to a 5-day hotel quarantine, down from 7, followed by a 3-day home isolation. He added that Hong Kong's anti-COVID policies are based on the city's pandemic situation as well as the global situation. Meanwhile, government pandemic advisor David Ho today suggested that authorities reduce the number of PCR tests for inbound travelers. However, the mask mandate has to remain in place at least after this winter. The mainland reported more than 14,000 new locally acquired COVID infections. It was the third consecutive day that its daily infection tally surpassed the 10,000 mark. More than 4,000 cases were identified in Guangdong. Residents of multiple cities and regions in Guangdong have been under lockdown for more than a week. They are required to undergo mass testing for COVID. In Zhuhai, to ensure a stable supply for daily necessities, authorities had set up some mobile stations for selling food across the region. It's understood that lockdown restrictions in Zhuhai will be lifted tomorrow. The Democratic Party in the United States will keep control of the U.S. Senate after Catherine Cortez Masto won re-election in Nevada. Cortez Masto narrowly defeated Republican challenger Adam Laxalt, who was endorsed by former President Donald Trump. Matthew Bray reports.
Democrats will still control the Senate after Senator Catherine Cortez Masto was declared the winner over Republican Adam Laxalt, a former state attorney general. She held a 5,000 vote lead over Laxalt late Saturday. But even with votes from rural counties left to count in the swing state, her lead would hold, according to the Associated Press. That means Democrats would control at least 50 seats in the chamber, allowing Vice President Kamala Harris to keep a majority with a tie-breaking vote. Since Election Day, Nevada continued to count mail ballots that saw Laxalt's lead of 19,000 eroded. Continued control of the Senate would allow Democrats to approve Biden nominees such as federal judges. Speaking in Cambodia ahead of an East Asia summit, Biden said he was optimistic on the outcome so far.
I'm incredibly pleased by the turnout, and I think it's a reflection of the quality of our candidates, and they're all running on the same program.
A Democratic victory in Georgia's runoff next month would then give the party outright majority control with a 51-49 Senate. The win in Nevada for Masto came on the heels of Democratic Senator Mark Kelly winning re-election in Arizona late on Friday. Kelly, the husband of Gabby Giffords, who survived an assassination attempt, defeated Republican Blake Masters. Kelly, a former astronaut, stressed unity.
No one party has a monopoly on good ideas or the support of voters. But I have seen that when we seek to represent everyone, not just the people who voted for us, we're capable of extraordinary things.
There were protests in Arizona outside the Maricopa County Election Center by Trump supporters calling for a recount and alleging election fraud. No winner has been projected yet in the Arizona governor's race, where Democrat Katie Hobbs holds a slim lead over the GOP's Kari Lake. Republicans hold the edge for control of the House of Representatives. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Hong Kong reported 6,575 new COVID infections today, 467 of which were imported cases. This was the first time the city surpassed the 6,000 mark since late October. Meanwhile, government pandemic advisor Ivan Hung expects Hong Kong will see a resurgence of COVID during the flu season this winter. However, he said there would be room for further relaxing or completely lifting all anti-COVID rules next summer, given the daily COVID caseload would drop over the long run. Christy Kant with more.
Recently, Hong Kong has seen a stabilizing COVID situation with daily COVID cases between 4,000 and 7,000. Speaking to TVB News, government pandemic advisor Ivan Hung, however, said there will be a potential surge in the number of cases of both influenza and COVID this winter. That's because the city didn't experience any influenza outbreak in the past 3 years. As a result, the community will have a relatively low immunity against the disease. And he was also worried about the consequences of contracting COVID followed by influenza or vice versa.
There may be a damage caused by the influenza at the beginning in the upper respiratory tract, and then subsequently you acquire the COVID, it becomes a more severe pneumonia in the lower tract. And not just pneumonia, they could also precipitate other chronic conditions. And as a result, there will be severe disease complication and even death.
Hung said it is pivotal to keep up the mask mandate this winter, as well as continue to vaccinate high-risk groups, such as the elderly and young children. For the time being, he said it is not necessary for Hong Kongers to take the fourth jab, citing that the risk of developing severe disease or even death would be low if people had already received 3 COVID doses. In terms of further relaxing the anti-COVID rules in the city, he believes the PCR testing arrangement for inbound travelers could be completely removed next year.
The reason for this, of course, is that the overall PCR testing, as you can see, will not be able to defend against these variants. They still come in to Hong Kong.
He believes that Hong Kong could return to normalcy next year, citing the daily COVID infection tally will drop eventually as the city has rising natural immunity and vaccination rates.
The coming summer in 2023 will be the time perhaps to return to normal generally, meaning that all these measures at the airport and also in the community, probably they could all be so-called removed.
However, he stressed that it is still essential for people to wear face masks as well as get the flu shots and COVID booster jab for winter. Christy Khan, TVB News.
Elsewhere, Cambodian leader Hun Sen has called for unity, telling delegates at the opening of the East Asia Summit today that current global tensions have been taking a toll on everyone. The Prime Minister, whose country holds the rotating chair of ASEAN, said it was in the world's common interest to cooperate to solve differences peacefully. Among the attendees at the summit, held in Phnom Penh, included Premier Li Keqiang, US President Joe Biden, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Other attendees were the leaders of Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan. Meanwhile, Li Keqiang said China's economy has grown 3% over the past 3 quarters and is stabilizing on an upward trend. Li said this in a meeting with International Monetary Fund Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva yesterday on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Indonesia beefed up security today near the venue of the G20 meeting on the resort island of Bali. Security checks on vehicles and participants have intensified as media representatives and delegates started to stream into the area. Heads of state of the world's 20 biggest economies are set to meet there on Tuesday and Wednesday. The 2-day summit is the first among G20 leaders since Russia invaded Ukraine, which is likely to be a major topic of conversation. President Xi Jinping is expected to meet his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden tomorrow. That marks the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders since Biden took office early last year. Still to come on tonight's news, more Ukrainian personnel arrive in Kherson City to restore essential services. And an Iranian man who lived at a French airport for 18 years dies. Welcome back to TVB News. Ukrainian civil service personnel are arriving in the southern city of Kherson in an attempt to restore essential services. Ukrainian officials said Russian troops had caused as much damage as possible when they withdrew from the city they had occupied for almost 9 months. As residents celebrated the arrival of Ukrainian soldiers, stabilization measures were taking place, including the clearing of thousands of landmines and unexploded shells. Nazvi Karim reports.
Ukrainian soldiers given a hero's welcome as they arrived largely unopposed in Kherson in the south, not long after Russian troops abandoned the main city. Residents carrying blue and yellow Ukrainian flags swarmed onto the streets to greet the troops, almost 9 months after Russian forces had captured the regional capital of the Kherson region. But the celebrations failed to hide the fact that the Russians left behind a shell of a city, one that lacked water, medicine and bread, according to its mayor. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the Russians had destroyed crucial infrastructure as they left the city. He added that Ukraine technicians had already found 2,000 mines, tripwires and unexploded shells as they tried their best to make the city livable once again. Footage of this explosion at the key Novokakhovka Dam was released by Russian media. Both sides have accused each other of wanting to damage the dam, which supplies power and water to Kherson city and other areas. Moscow claimed it annexed Kherson in September and insists it remains part of Russia forever. In the Cambodian capital Phnom Penh, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit, hailing Kyiv's success in Kherson.
We're meeting today at a time when Ukraine has just liberated the city of Kherson, the region. And that success is a testament once again to the remarkable courage of the Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian people, as well as the strong support that Ukraine has from countries around the world, including, of course, the United States.
Blinken also assured Kuleba that any peace initiative would be at the behest of Ukraine. This after the Washington Post reported last week that the U.S. had been secretly encouraging Ukrainian leaders to reach out to Moscow for peace talks. While in Cambodia, Kuleba signed a peace accord with ASEAN countries and is also seeking material support from the region. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Ethiopia and Tigrayan forces have reached an agreement laying out a path to the implementation of a peace deal that both sides agreed in South Africa earlier this month. The two sides have been meeting for days in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, led by African Union mediators. The latest steps call for a cessation of all forms of military activity. Both parties have agreed to protect civilians and smooth the delivery of humanitarian aid to the 5 million people of the Tigray region. The two-year conflict in the region has killed thousands and displaced thousands of others. If the peace talks remain on track, another meeting of military leaders will be held in Tigray in December, followed by a final meeting in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, in January. An Iranian man whose life in an airport inspired the Steven Spielberg film The Terminal has died. Mehran Karimi Nazari lived for 18 years in Paris's Charles de Gaulle Airport and died there on Saturday at Terminal 2F, officials say. The 77-year-old reportedly suffered a heart attack. In 1974, Nazari left Iran to study in England. When he returned, he said he was imprisoned for protesting against the Shah and expelled without a passport. He lived in the airport's Terminal 1 from 1988 until 2006, first in legal limbo because he lacked residency papers and later by apparent choice. He slept on a red plastic bench, made friends with airport workers, and showered in staff facilities. In the 2004 film The Terminal, Tom Hanks portrayed an Eastern European man who was stuck in the transit area of JFK Airport in New York. That's the news. Thanks for watching.